Rochester, New York. July 2016. In the small, sleepy village of Pittsford lived the Rideout family. 50-year-old IT specialist and programmer Craig, his wife Laura, and their 7 children. The eldest was Colin, followed by Andrew, Alexander, Elizabeth, Julia, Patrick, and Madeline. Craig had met and married Laura in 1993, and they couldn't wait to start a family of their own, having their first baby just a short while later. And being extremely close to his sister Robin and her children, everyone said that family was all that mattered to Craig. He was well known in his community, often working with youth groups, organising charity events, and in his spare time he loved gaming. Though a big and bustling family had always been a dream of Craig's, this undoubtedly came with financial issues, and he often was away due to his long working hours. Robin said that Laura didn't really seem to worry as much as Craig about money, but things got more stressful when bankruptcy conversations started happening, and the family were forced to move house and downsize. Laura had openly not been happy for a while, and a wedge had started forming between her and Craig, and her in-laws. Laura and some of the kids soon stopped showing up for holiday dinners at Craig's family, and when Robin said, "Are you guys coming?" one of the children would often respond with, "Oh, Mum's not feeling well," but then another kid would say, "That's not true, Mum didn't want to come." Laura presented Craig with divorce papers in 2014, and sometime during this period she got close to and moved in with a family friend, Paul Tucci, known as PJ. Paul's wife Jennifer had sadly passed away around the same time as Craig and Laura split. Paul and Craig actually went back as far as college, and their children had grown up together, almost into one big family. Paul was even godfather to Colin. Craig wanted Laura to be happy and loved his old friend dearly, so he was putting on a brave face, but deep down, he was finding it tough seeing them together. With a pending divorce and custody issues now happening, his stresses were mounting. Craig was eventually awarded primary custody of Patrick and Madeline, and Elizabeth and Julia would also live with him. His 3 oldest children, Andrew, Colin and Alex, who were over the age of 18, could live where they wanted, with Colin and Alex staying with Laura and Paul. Craig was now trying to rebuild bridges with the older children as well as his ex-wife. The relationships, especially with Alex and Colin, seemed to be going south for reasons he just couldn't understand. Alex had put a post out on Facebook calling his dad a coward and emotionally abusive. Robin had seen the post and immediately called Craig. This was so out of left field. Robin said her brother was devoted to his kids and would never intentionally hurt them. She wanted to respond to Alex and defend Craig, but Craig said to leave it. He didn't want to create a public scene. On July 13, 2016, Craig was woken up by an intruder in his bedroom. Someone dressed all in black had burst in, plucked a hair from his arm, stole his BlackBerry and ran off. Craig found his keys in a plant pot outside.
My name's Craig Rideout.
What happened?
I wake up at midnight with a sharp pain in my arm. I jump up. This will sound crazy. A hooded black figure, not a black man, was running out of the room. The reason I have to file a police report is my BlackBerry, which was taken that night.
Craig told police he thought the person in his house was possibly his son, Colin, playing some sort of weird prank. But when an email from Colin came in, it was clear there was no joking around here. His oldest son leveraged more heavy accusations against Craig, and the email was cutting. He called him Craig, not Dad, accused him of dragging out the divorce to hurt his mother, faking the break-in at his home, and blaming his children for what he called heinous deeds. At this point, Craig, already frustrated with Laura's attempts to turn everyone against him, was firm with Colin. He asked why he couldn't just reach out to him instead of ignoring him for months, then launching an attack via email. And as for the divorce and custody, Craig knew exactly what was going on in the courts. He had even complained to his attorney that Laura had misscheduled pickups, showing up without notice, changing plans, and missing picking the children up from school. One day, Laura had even left all of the children on Craig's doorstep without telling him. Robin also said that if Craig was abusive, there was no way he would have been awarded custody. Safe to say, Craig was dealing with a lot and was leaning on his sister now more than ever. He would go to her for advice about everything and anything, and they were in contact almost hourly. But on the morning of July 19th, 2016, the prompt contact and swift replies were non-existent. Robin was not able to get through to Craig either on his work or personal phone. She called his work but was told he had sent an email the night before saying his daughter was sick and he wouldn't be contactable. Robin drove straight to his house. His minivan was missing, and as she walked towards the door, she saw a figure through the window. It was Laura. Laura said she came over to look for Craig as the children said he wasn't there when they woke up. She had stayed to clean the kitchen as there was a funny smell. Robin nervously took a quick look around the house and saw his shoes neatly lined up, his jackets on the door, and his belongings still there. Unable to put her panic aside anymore, she called 911.
My brother has not been answering texts or cell phone calls or emails, and I could be making a mountain out of a molehill.
The police obtained a search warrant and a missing persons report was filed. Laura, along with Craig's two youngest children, Madeline and Patrick, spoke to the officers.
Obviously, you're a little bit concerned about him, I guess.
I don't even know where to
think. Was he there when you woke up? The last time you saw your dad was when, honey?
Yesterday. He was playing video games on the computer. He went to the bathroom and then he went downstairs. And then that night he was downstairs and then he disappeared in the morning.
When was the last time you saw him?
11:30 last night when he was going to bed.
And then what happened this morning?
Wasn't there? So I was just guessing you went to work.
Nothing seemed disturbed, no expensive items were missing. There were no smashed windows or signs of a forced entry. Inside the basement, things were a little more messy than upstairs. But as it was only used for storage, this wasn't that weird. However, as they looked closer, they saw red spots on some of the boxes, and inside a bin bag there was a handmade garrote covered in blood. Some bags contained leather work gloves which looked stained with blood, and a spray of luminol found blood not only on the floor, but on the walls too. Blood did not look like it had been there long at all. As everything was bagged up and sent for testing, investigators turned their attention to Craig's phone. Calls were going through, so his phone was still on. This meant that getting data from his phone provider and finding the last known location would be a lot easier. It showed the phone as being about 50 miles away from his house, and in this exact spot, all those miles away, little did anyone realise another investigation was underway. At 7:53 that morning, the police had received a call.
He's coming, 911. We discovered that in the woods there's a body under a tarp just down the road.
They found a shovel by the roadside, and there was a trail of blood too. They followed it over to some brown tarp, and when they walked around the back, they saw a foot poking out. Police and paramedics arrived, but it was clear that nothing could be done, and it did not take long for them to identify the deceased male. Investigators suddenly heard a phone buzzing. It was coming from under the tarp. The caller ID was Robin Drew, Craig's sister. They had to wait for an official identification, but it was pretty clear. It was Craig. The medical examiner said he had suffered severe blunt force trauma to the head and neck and facial fractures. There was a deep indentation of the skin all the way around the neck, which showed a device was used to strangle him. A strong acid had been poured onto his body to try and make him unidentifiable. It was so powerful it had eaten through his clothes and even exposed bone in some places. Found in the tarp were white bottle caps, potentially the caps from the bottles containing the acid. They did not believe he had been killed there. The murder scene was likely his basement, and then his killer or killers had moved him here. Later that evening, as Robin was still at Craig's house, Laura and Paul showed up with the two youngest children. Laura told the detective they were dropping the children off as per their arrangements, and had they found Craig. She admitted she'd been at the house earlier that day cleaning, but she and Paul had no idea where Craig was and was hoping he had returned home from wherever he'd been. Robin told the police that her brother had a camera in the house, which they had found disguised as a digital alarm clock in the kitchen, and it was pointing directly at the main walkway in the house. If anyone was to enter or leave Craig's home, they should have been caught. But there was nothing even remotely concerning on the footage. It showed the family going about their day, cooking and going to school, but nothing more than that. It seemed that once the memory was full, it did not rewrite itself. It simply stopped recording. So sadly, they didn't have anything around the time they believed Craig had been killed. Such a positive lead had just reached a dead end. The search continued. With the murder scene in one county and his body in another, investigators had a lot of ground to cover. But only a day later, on July 21st, investigators were alerted to a location chillingly called Devil's Bathtub in Mendham Ponds Park. A local dog walker had raised the alarm when she had spotted two people acting suspiciously, throwing rubbish bags out of their car and into the pond. The officers apprehended them. It was none other than Colin Rideout and Alex Rideout.
So what's going on? You and your brother out for a walk?
Yeah, basically, we were just like out and then suddenly people show up and it's like, well, I've never really encountered police before, so it was like...
You've never been in trouble before, right?
No, I don't really do drugs or drink or really party. How old are you? I'm 19. I'm doing college next year.
At this point, only Robin knew that her brother was dead. It was as good as confirmed, but not until the dental records came back.
Have you heard anything from your dad? Well, I emailed him last night. I didn't hear from him. I heard from him Monday, and he picked up my brother and sister, I think, Tuesday. I've been kind of worried about him for, stuff's just been freaking me out. Because
he'd always threaten, oh, I could just disappear. And I figured he was on the next flight to Mexico.
Colin told the detectives he was worried about his father, hoping he was found safe and well. And Alex was claiming he had no idea what was in the bags. Colin then admitted that his mom had asked them to dump everything.
It was just something my mom told me, hey,
When did your mom tell you to do that?
It was this morning. Did she give you the bag? Yeah.
I'm worried about what's in that bag, and I'm going to tell you that if you tell me what's in that bag before I see what's in that bag, it'll be better for you.
I don't know what's in the bag.
Yeah. Do you believe in God?
I do, yeah.
We seek truth.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that maybe we can be a little truthful today, okay?
Yeah.
Before long, Alex actually planted them at their dad's house, admitting he had seen blood in the basement. The bags contained paper towels covered in blood, bloody clothing and shoes, and 4 bottles of very strong drain cleaner matching the ones found with his body. Investigators had the idea to go to get the brothers some food and a drink, so they went to a local fast food chain with the intentions of taking the straws they used to obtain the DNA. After this, Alex and Colin were both arrested for tampering with evidence, but the police knew there was more to it. They then headed straight to Paul and Laura's house to place them under arrest too. Laura was shocked and the police said to her, "You must have been expecting this." She coolly replied, "If I was expecting this, I would have put on some makeup," before grabbing some heels to wear to the station. She seemed very confident that she would be returning home. A look around the couple's house found that she had a spare fob to Craig's car, and some blue tape that was used to make the homemade garrote that they believed was used to strangle Craig. However, at this point, the 4 could only be arrested for tampering with evidence.
A father of 7 dead, his estranged wife and 2 sons charged with covering up his murder. But who actually killed him? We went into the neighborhood where this father was killed and where police say 2 of his children tried to cover up the murder. He went missing Tuesday night. Just 1 day later, his body was found wrapped in a tarp in Yates County. And now 3 of his family members are charged in connection to his death. His 2 sons are still locked up behind bars behind you. They are not charged with murder, they're just charged with trying to cover it up, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Berkeley. The two sons and his estranged wife have both been charged with tampering with physical evidence at the moment. But this is still a very active investigation, and police tell us it is very likely that at least one of the three of them will be charged with murder soon. The folks who live in Rideout's townhome community relieved it wasn't a random crime, but still saddened by the loss.
Still, it doesn't make it any less horrifying to think that a neighbor would, that anyone kills anyone else. That to me is just unfathomable.
All right, Jen, thanks. Now, if you're like us, you can't help but think of the similarities between this case and the Charlie Tan case. And now, just like Charlie, there is this GoFundMe page set up by friends and family of Alex and Colin Rideout. And in the introduction to it, it says, "This is not the first time something like this has happened in Pittsford," referring, obviously, to the Charlie Tan case. And in just about 5 hours, they've already raised a little more than $3,000. The goal is $55,000.
They were eventually let out on bail. A few days later, it came as no surprise when the medical examiner officially confirmed it was definitely Craig's body.
As Sheriff Spike previously mentioned, our investigators received reports of a body that was found in a wooded area near Adams Road in Yates County in the town of Jerusalem. The Sheriff's Office here and the Yates County Sheriff's Office and members of the New York State Police began a joint investigation, and we believe the body of the individual found in Yates County is our missing person, Craig Rideout. And we're awaiting forensic confirmation from the Monroe County Medical Examiner's Office before we can officially announce that. However, based on some of the evidence that we found throughout the investigation, we believe that to be the case. In connection with this homicide investigation, we're announcing the arrest of Alexander Rideout and Colin Rideout and Laura Rideout.
With the four suspects out on bail, the police needed to connect everyone to the place where Craig's body had been dumped, and they had been pulling cameras from the main roads between the two counties. Investigators looked at the cell phone data again, which highlighted a rough few locations of where his phone had been. Using that information, they were able to plot out a route from Craig's house to the location his body was found in, and request all footage on said route. They knew his phone had left home at roughly 3 a.m. on the morning of July 19th, when his body was being moved, and traffic would have been light, so spotting cars was much easier. They came across some footage from a hotel about halfway between the two locations. They captured two vehicles speeding through the frame, very close to each other, linked to Craig's moving phone. The footage at night was unclear, so they could not make out any identifiable features of the passing vehicles. They wanted to see if the same route back home was used, so they fast-forwarded the tape to see if they could catch the vehicles in a convoy. They caught a dark-coloured sedan and a white minivan matching the description of Craig's van, going back along the same road. They were able to locate the vehicles travelling together on 6 more cameras. Though they did not know the final destination of these vehicles, this confirmed their thoughts that there was more than one person involved in this murder. Craig's van was eventually found in a parking lot of the local park and ride, but with no cameras covering this spot, they couldn't tell who parked it. Using card transactions, investigators were led to a Walmart. The Rideouts and Paul had made 3 trips to Walmart in the 24 hours around Craig's death. First, they saw a sedan pull up, and a male got out of the back seat and went into the store. They identified him as Colin. He was captured purchasing the shovel along with 4 pairs of work gloves. He exited and returned to the same car, but extra enhancements on another camera showed at least 3 other people in the vehicle, but it was just too hard to see them clearly. Using more receipts and card data, another transaction at the same Walmart was located for the drain cleaner. It showed Laura, Colin, and one of her daughters in the store. Colin then purchased the cleaner. The brown tarp that had been used to wrap up Craig's body, more drain cleaner, the bungee cord used to make the murder weapon, and a bottle of Coke had also been purchased at another Walmart on the 19th of July at 9 p.m, just a few hours before they believed Craig was killed. Laura Rideout was seen entering, but this time with Paul Tucci. Police started to test the DNA on the uncovered items. The clothes found in the bags at the pond matched the clothes worn by Colin when he was seen purchasing the shovel. And Alex's DNA was found on the items in the basement of Craig's home as well. The trousers Laura was seen wearing when purchasing the brown tarp were also in the bags, and her DNA was also found on a bottle of Diet Coke in Craig's basement. Paul Tucci's clothes that he was seen wearing in the Walmart footage were never located. However, his DNA was found on things inside the bag in the pond. Laura, Paul, Colin and Alex were all charged with second-degree murder and tampering with evidence, and they pleaded not guilty to everything. Further investigation in Paul's home led to one more arrest. 19-year-old Theodore Tucci, Paul's son, was charged with being in possession of several child abuse material. The only motive that presented itself was the pending move and custody battle. Detectives believed that Laura had done everything she could to try and turn her children against Craig. Laura and Paul had already taken out a lease on a place in North Carolina, just 3 weeks before Craig was killed, and when Laura said she wanted her children to go with them, Craig said no way. This set the plan in motion. Just days after signing the lease, Laura sent a text to Colin asking for his help in getting custody of her 2 youngest children. Via text, they made a plan to try and get her 2 youngest daughters to provoke Craig somehow. They hoped he would get angry enough or aggressive enough so Laura could call the police and have them taken away. Colin texted one of his younger sisters asking them to make sure they called 911 if he even raised his voice. The correct verbiage to get their attention would be, "He's trying to break down the door and I'm afraid he's going to kill my sister," he added. Elizabeth barricaded herself and her siblings in a room, but the plan went wrong as Craig did not react angrily at all. Later, Laura complained via text to Colin about the plan having gone awry. She was focused on Julia, telling Colin she had fucked everything up, and he should knock some sense into her. Colin's response to his mother was, "Turn off Julia's phone right now. She'll break in 48 hours. Robin and the rest of his family reiterated there was just no way. There have obviously been negative comments that have been made against the character of my brother Craig. I would ask that careful consideration be given prior to believing this negativity. My younger brother was a generous, loving person. It was such a dark and devious situation that had played out, and police said Laura had really poisoned everyone's minds.
Will there be 1 trial or 4 trials for Craig Rideout's murder? We expect it.
In an unusual twist, it was decided that all 4 would be tried together at the same time. Everyone turned on each other. Laura's lawyers were pointing the finger at Colin. Colin's were saying it was Laura. Paul's attorney said they didn't know who it was, but it couldn't have been Paul. And it was true, they really had no idea who had actually killed Craig. But there was so much evidence to be presented, the prosecution knew it was still a strong case against the 4. During the 5-week trial, prosecutors called more than 50 witnesses and introduced nearly 700 pieces of evidence. The theory was that Craig and Laura's 2 youngest children were dropped off that evening, and Laura said she wanted to talk to Craig about the impending move. She somehow lured Craig into the basement where his sons, who had their own key along with Paul, were already waiting. Craig had tried to put up a fight, but he was struck in the face by someone and strangled before he could fight anymore. The defense lawyers all rested their cases without calling anyone. Closing arguments took place on the 1st anniversary of Craig's death, and this only added to an already emotionally charged court case. The jury deliberated for 5 days.
Alexander Rideout, you've been found not guilty of murder in the 2nd degree, guilty of 2 counts of tampering with physical evidence. Colin Rideout, the jury has found you guilty of murder in the 2nd degree and guilty of 2 counts of tampering with physical evidence. You're remanded to the custody of the sheriff pending sentence. Laura Rideout, the jury has convicted you of murder in the 2nd degree, tampering with physical evidence, and burglary in the 2nd degree.
Laura Rideout was found guilty of second-degree murder, along with burglary and tampering with evidence.
Laura Rideout, count number 1, murder in the 2nd degree, 25 foot. Count 2, tampering with physical evidence, 134 years in state prison. Burglary in the 2nd degree, 15 years plus 5 years post-release supervision. Those terms are run consecutively.
She later received 28 years to life and will first be eligible for parole in 2055. She will be 83 years old. Colin was found guilty of murder and tampering with evidence and also received a 28-year to life sentence. He will be eligible for parole in 2043 when he is 50 years old. Alex was found not guilty of murder, but was found guilty of tampering with evidence and received a 2 to 8 year sentence.
Mr. Tucci, you've been found not guilty of murder in the second degree and tampering with physical evidence. Any bail you have posted is hereby released. Any records concerning this matter are hereby sealed.
Paul Tucci was acquitted completely. The judge called it a premeditated, evil, and diabolical scheme.
This community has, is, and should be horrified of what happened to Craig Rideout. The manner in which he was murdered and the manner in which he was disposed of. And at trial, I think the proof was very clear. Alexander Rideout was in the basement, and he was at Devil's Ponds. Colin Rideout was in the basement and was in Devil's Ponds. And was there at the time Craig Rideout died, based upon the blood spatter expert who testified here at the trial. And that same proof put Laura Rideout in the basement at the time Craig Rideout was killed. I, like Mr. DeGreeman, have been doing this for quite some time. This is one of the ugliest things I've ever seen.
All rise, court is in recess.
This was so much of a punch in the gut for Craig's family. Agnes, Craig's mother, said, "People have asked me, how does a mother convince her children to kill their father? My true belief is that you start with a little lie, then you begin to believe it, and eventually you're telling it to your kids. There was an effort to create a narrative for a long time."
I had the honor in January of 1993 to be a part of one of the best days of my brother's life, his marriage to Laura Basin. They were young, happy, and in love. Together they brought 7 beautiful children into this world. He loved each of them. Little did I know what the future would bring. It is beyond comprehension that 23 years later, I would find Laura in Craig's kitchen, and then that she would be found guilty of his murder. Even worse is that one of their children would be found to have been intricately involved in these events, and that another was involved with tampering of evidence. On top of that, Laura tried to involve their younger children in earlier events prior to Craig's death. I have been worried about not only my husband and all of our children and their response to this atrocity, but the effect that it has had on my mother. She has not only lost her son, but 2 of her grandchildren to jail and prison time. Not only that, but we have not had contact with the rest of my brother's children. We can only hope that we can have some kind of a relationship with them in the future, and hope that we have not been painted with the same falseness that their mother painted their father.
The lead investigator said that despite the verdict, he was positive Paul was directly involved. He believes Paul was the one that struck Craig in the face, and given the fact that Craig was over 6 foot and 200 pounds, Paul would have been instrumental in getting him up the stairs and into the van. Paul gave a handful of interviews to local media in the days after the verdict and appeared in a Dateline documentary too. He put his house up for sale and moved away from Western New York. The last anyone heard, he lived a short distance away from the prison in Westchester County, where Laura is incarcerated. And a couple of years into her sentence, he was still visiting her in prison. "How long do you wait for someone? I'll never turn my back on her or those kids. Hopefully we see a sunset together," he said. He still denies having anything to do with the murder and claims he had no idea who was behind it, saying he missed his old friend dearly and hoped that the truth would one day come out. He even sent an email to a journalist saying in part, "Frankly, I have never seen more one-sided reporting on a topic ever. Robin is the least credible resource, as she was not only uninvolved in the Rideout affairs for 20 years, she had the most to gain from his death. She is now the sole heir to the Rideout estate, and also the insurance agent for the Rideout clan. Your failure to even research any other aspect makes you complicit in the whole sham."
Did one of the suspected killers of Craig Rideout kill the four? News 10 NBC is breaking the story. Murder suspect Paul Tucci is the focus of another investigation.
Chief investigative reporter Berkeley Breen has learned exclusively that an expert is re-examining how Tucci's wife died back in 2014.
Investigators also wondered about Paul's wife Jennifer, who had passed away from liver disease, and the timing of her death. They found that it was possible to poison someone slowly and have it look like cirrhosis of the liver. They asked for her case to be reopened and said without a doubt they now had questions about whether Paul could be involved. But the district attorney did not pursue this, and the medical examiner said he was happy with the first examination. Colin also gave an interview saying he was set up to take the fall, directing much of his anger towards Laura. The thing that angered me the most was her unwillingness to take any kind of responsibility, because whenever I would talk to her, she would be, "I'm sorry this is happening." It's like, no, this isn't just happening, she did this. She set me up for murder. Ask anyone who knows me, I'm not an impetuous person. I don't do things impulsively or on a whim, but that murder was premeditated, it was deliberate, it was calculated, he said. He claimed his only involvement was cleaning up the blood, but that he was unaware of what had happened and thought maybe at the worst there had been an accident. There is even a free Colin Rideout page. But when his mom Laura filed her appeal, she blamed her sons for everything. Her attorney said, "This is not the plan of a reasonable, intelligent adult. This is more indicative of impetuous violence by sons who thought they were helping their siblings escape an abusive father, followed by a slapdash attempt to cover up their crime." Laura's appeal was denied.
Alex Rideout, who was convicted in connection to his father's murder, has been released from prison.
Alex Rideout, who was not convicted of murder, was soon freed. Craig and Laura's youngest children went to live with other family members in the Midwest. Julia graduated high school, Elizabeth started college, and Andrew started serving in the United States Marine Corps. This case is the definition of senseless, heartless, and with everyone continuing to point the finger at each other, it makes you ask more questions than you'll ever get answers to, and leaves a family irreparably broken. Craig's mom Agnes said she still talks to Andrew, but everything else is just too fractured. So much has happened. Robin agreed and said, "It is still beyond my comprehension that they thought this was the only way out. The ends didn't justify the means." By all accounts, Craig was a family man through and through. Everything he did was for his family, and how tragic that is when you think about the nature of his death. He gave a lot in his time to his community, always conducting himself with dignity, grace, and leading with kindness. Robin and her family strive to continue to carry themselves in the same way. She said, "There's nothing to be done to bring my brother back. My hope is that he will be remembered as the kind, loving man he was." We are so grateful to all of our viewers and all of our patrons, and we'd love you to consider joining our little community over on Patreon. It also gives you behind the scenes, extra episodes, and early ad-free access.